Welcome to the But First Bible Daily Devotional Podcast with Dave Myers. Well, our readings for today come from the Old Testament. We have Ecclesiastes chapters 4, 5, and 6, and in the New Testament we have 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Well, we continue our study in the book of Ecclesiastes, and you'd remember from yesterday that one of the key words that's repeated all the way through Ecclesiastes is the word vanity, vanity of vanities. Now, the Hebrew word behind that is the word chebel, and it's repeated, and kind of the idea of it is this idea of transient, temporary, but a breath. And kind of as the teacher, as the preacher in the book of Ecclesiastes goes about life and pursues different things and searches for meaning in different places, whether that's pleasure, whether that's work, whether that's wealth, whether that's possessions, wherever that is, kind of the big conclusion in the book is that it's vanity. It's temporary. It's here but for a moment. You might find pleasure, you might find wealth, but it's here today and it is gone tomorrow. Now, into the mix of this question of vanity and temporary, transient existence, the book of Ecclesiastes also, therefore, raises the question of how do we approach God? How do we approach the eternal God? Have a look in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 1. It begins by this. It says, "Guard your steps when you go to the house of God." Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. There are two ways in these next two paragraphs to approach God. Number one is the folly of human-centered religion. Number one, the folly of human-centered religion. God is holy, and so it's crazy to think that we can approach him on our own terms. Worship that's based around human-centeredness is foolish. Have a look at the verse again. Verse 1, "Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools. But they do not know that they are doing evil. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven and you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few, for a dream comes with much busyness, and a fool's voice with many words." You see, the fools described here in verses 1, 2, and 3 enter the house of God, ready to make their temple offering, their sacrifice, but they fail to be obedient. They're ready to offer lengthy, babbling prayers, but they fail to listen to God's word. And so it continues, verse 4, "When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity, but God is the one you must fear." You see, God is not pleased by foolish religion, where we make a vow but don't keep it. Human-centered religion promises so much, but it delivers so little. There's so much religious talk, but not enough time spent listening. Now, all the religions of the world, the main religions of the world, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, the way many have even practiced Judaism and Christianity is so often based on what I can do. The prayers I pray, the pilgrimages I make, the charity I give, the deeds I perform, the enlightenment I reach, the steps I take. It's all about me. I. Now, the preacher here in Ecclesiastes, though, says emphatically that we are fooling ourselves and our human-centered religion is worthless. Depending on our own religiosity is pointless when we come to the house of God. So number one, the folly of human-centered religion. Number two is the wisdom of God-centered religion. You see, there's a radically different way to approach religion and worship. We approach God on his terms. We are God-centered in our religion. Have a look at the text again, and what you'll notice in the verses I read out, and I won't read them all out again, but you'll see the contrast between the fool and the wise. And so in verse 1, we saw to draw near to listen is better. All right, God-centered religion listens to God. And the idea of listening to God is listening and then following through, hearing then heeding, listening and obeying. The fool's trying to offer sacrifices. God says, I don't want your sacrifices, I want your obedience. And in verse 2, the second half of it, for God is in heaven and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. God-centered religion is all about knowing your place before him. He's the creator, we are creatures. He is in heaven, we are on earth. And that really is the key to Ecclesiastes. That's the key to all wisdom literature. So, do you know whose presence you're standing in when you approach God? Then shut up. Let your words be few. Now, verse 6 says, why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands? You see, the wise person who is God-centered in their religion and their worship doesn't question the right for God to be angry at folly or sin or human-centeredness. Verse 7, for when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity, but God is the one whom you must fear. You see, ultimately, the key to wisdom and the wisdom of God-centered religion is we approach him fearing him. We approach him in reverence of him. It's not just being afraid of him. It's recognizing he is God and we are not. He is creator. We are creatures. Jesus in the New Testament tells a story of someone who approaches God with the folly of human-centeredness and someone who approaches God with the wisdom of God-centeredness. Two men go to a temple to pray. We read about in Luke 18. One was a Pharisee and one was a tax collector. The Pharisee was a good man. The tax collector was a terrible man. The Pharisee prays about himself and thanks God for his obedience, thanks God for the things that he does. But the tax collector stands at a distance. He won't even look up to God, but says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus says that the tax collector, the bad person, is the one who went home friends with God rather than the Pharisee, the good person, who thought that they could approach God on their own terms. You see, ultimately the way that anyone can stand before God is not by trusting in what we do, but trusting in the mercy of God. Ultimately, the mercy of God shown in Jesus. You see, we are accepted in Christianity, according to the Bible, not based on the things we do, the things we offer, but we are accepted because of what Jesus has done on our behalf. He's lived the life we failed to live. He's died the death that we deserve. And he's been raised again, that all who put their trust in him will have life eternal, will have life beyond the vanity and the transient existence of this life. We will live forever with him who died for us and was raised again. Until tomorrow, keep trusting Jesus.